it is my pleasure to bring to you and to the City Club Professor Larry Sabato from the University of Virginia.
Wonderful. Paul, thank you very, very much. And I'm just delighted to be here because you all love politics. This whole city loves politics, and I love politics. And my slogan is actually, and this is probably the only city in the world that would agree with me, I have these little stickers, which Eric and my other former students here remember. Politics is a good thing. It happens to be in UVA colors, of course. And Wahoo Wah is our nonsensical chant. I can't even tell you what it means, and I've been there for 36 years. But I really believe this. Politics is a good thing. Now, I notice I didn't say politicians, though some are terrific. There's some here that I've been meeting and talking to who are wonderful. But the process is incomparable. There's nothing like it anywhere in the world. Some good, some bad, but it really is unique in so many different ways. And I believe in it. People think of politics, maybe especially in Chicago, as being smoke-filled rooms and corruption and bribery and all the rest of it. But it's so much more than that. It really is just a way that people make their communities better. And over time, we improve and we reform. You wouldn't know it from the headlines. I'm not talking about Mark Foley more than I have to. Please don't ask me too many questions about Mark Foley, but it does play into the election, and we'll cover that. But it's just so great to be in a city that loves politics, cares about politics, thinks politics. And as we were just saying, and these three are fantastic, both academically and politically, and they stress to me what I believe is the case. What really matters is your local politics, like my former student Eric Davis, who's now an elected city councilman. I'm very proud. I've got over 100 students. I've had 14,000 of them. I got over 100 students in elective office in one place or another. I'm very proud of them because they have gotten out there and done it, and it's not easy to get elected. It's not easy to stay elected. That's the tougher part. But it's just wonderful to be in a place that loves politics, and I hope we'll have a good time today talking about the midterm elections, where we are. We're 32, 33 days away from the election, at least 4 eternities. That's 4 eternities. Remember 2 weeks ago we were talking about how the Republicans are going to pull this out. Incredibly, they're going to win the 3rd straight election, or 4th if you count 2000. I don't want to get into that argument. But they're going to win this thing because the global war on terror is coming to the fore again with the breakup of that British plane plot and the memories of 9/11 revisited. And President Bush's approval rating was popping up, and gas prices were dropping dramatically. And what took over in the media? What line took over? Well, the Republicans are going to win this thing. They're going to narrowly hold the House and narrowly hold the Senate. And President Bush will go through the end of his term at least having Congress under his party's control. And as of Friday, when the Foley thing broke, a whole new riff has taken over, that the Democrats not only are going to win, but they're going to score a landslide, that safe Republicans are going to fall like flies all over the country. Well, that's just as wrong as the earlier evaluation. We get so wrapped up in whatever is in the headlines today, we forget that the headlines are going to change, I would say 5 or 6 times, estimating before November 7th. And nobody knows what those headlines are going to be, but we know one thing. Both parties, Eric, as we were saying, have October surprises. Now, the Foley thing was an October surprise. I don't have to tell a room full of people who live in and around Chicago that was not an accident, that it was released in the month prior to the election. There are a lot of places in America. I've just been to Oklahoma, and, I was in Nebraska. I love those people. They're very, very naive. They're wonderfully naive. And many of them would believe that was a coincidence, that it just happened to be released then. Well, you know that these things, I'm not a member of the Grassy Knoll Society. I'm really not. I don't believe human beings are organized enough or effective enough to pull off that many conspiracies. But they can pull off a few. I'm still not convinced about gas prices. Yes, most of it is the law of supply and demand. The most powerful law never passed by Congress. I believe that, all right? But I kind of wonder whether or not, I hope this gentleman's all right back here. I didn't know I was making so emphatic a point, sir. And I hope you're okay. It's sue him. That's all I can tell you. But there's got to be a lawyer in this room, sir. Sue him. And I love the restaurants. Fantastic restaurant, good food. May put them out of business, but I was just giving some professional advice. The October surprises are coming, and both parties have these planned throughout October. And it's a good mental exercise to think about what they may be. What could it be? Well, obviously for Democrats who can't control the economy, and they can't control the war in Iraq, although they can certainly focus on the terrible photos that come out of there and the terrible video that comes out on a nightly basis. What can they control? There's exactly one thing they can control, and that is evidence of corruption from the Republicans. They've learned things over the last several years, especially the last 18 months. They've held some things back. They have friends in the Abramoff investigation. They have bits and pieces they're gonna lay out there for you. Now, what can the Republicans control? They're in the much stronger position because they control the presidency and the House and the Senate and the judiciary. So they've got more to play out. What is Karl Rove planning? Now, Karl Rove would never be satisfied with just one October surprise. My guess is it's going to be a whole series of October surprises. There will be many surprises. There will be maxi surprises. And he's planning on changing the headlines. If you think Karl Rove is going to let Mark Foley be the headline between now and November 7th, you haven't been paying attention to Boy Genius. So count on that. And think about what would change the direction of this election. Well, the obvious things are to focus on the global war on terror, where Republicans still maintain an advantage over Democrats, as opposed to Iraq, which is a disaster for Republicans. And then there's the economy. Now, I'm talking about the economy in the wrong part of the country, but on the whole, except for the Midwest, a few pieces in the South, a few isolated economies here and there, the economy's in pretty good shape. I don't agree with those who say it's a Goldilocks economy, but I do believe that the economy's in pretty good shape. And that can be sold in various ways, not just gas prices, but the economy as a whole. But the real key, the real kicker in this election is Iraq, much more so than Mark Foley and all the rest of it. If people are still depressed about Iraq, really depressed about the way things are going, if millions of Americans have read Bob Woodward's book by November 7th, then I think Republicans are going to lose a very substantial number of seats and probably tip over the 15 needed in the House to switch control. The Senate's and other matters we'll talk about in a moment. If, however, Karl Rove can orchestrate the blue smoke and mirrors of politics to make Iraq look better just in time for the election, then we may have a surprise. And people say, gee, how is that possible? One of my fundamental rules of politics, and I learned at this table from Dick and Kent and Paul about, easily 50 basic rules of politics. Now, some of them they stole from Vito Marzullo. You need to know that. They're not all original to them. But one of Sabato's basic rules of politics is that Election Day is a one-day clearance sale. All right? You can be behind 364 days out of the year. But if you orchestrate things so that you're ahead just that one day, you win. Doesn't matter that your opponent was ahead 364 days of the year. And Karl Rove and a lot of other smart people in politics understand that. And I think we can expect that they'll do a good job trying to make it happen. All right, well, let's talk about the election. We got a PowerPoint, and I appreciate this young man's help, and hope you're getting extra credit for this in some fashion or another. You be extra credit? He's getting paid? Oh, well, that's, yeah, increases salary, Paul. That's the way it's done in Chicago. We'll see how he does. Don't screw this up. Okay. Everybody knows the geographical presidential map of America in 2004, which is actually a little bit better than 2000 because it's all contiguous. You know, school children can paint the colors and stay within the lines. And it's a map created by the American public just the way they create one every 4 years. And it's a marvelous map because it really does tell us what the picture of partisanship is in America right now. And the Democratic Party is restricted to 3 areas, and you see your state very prominently in the blue category. But the Northeast is now totally Democratic. New Hampshire was the last state to fall, and it's not going back. I never say this up there because they don't like it, but it's merely a suburb of Massachusetts. They hate that, but it's absolutely true. And that was the last Republican state. Then the North Central states, and it doesn't escape most Americans that it is a great irony that you are a deeply blue state. In fact, you're the most deeply blue of those 4 North Central states. The land of Lincoln is deeply blue. But Michigan, 4 or 5 point Democratic. Wisconsin, 2 or 3 in competitive elections. Minnesota, more in the Michigan category, 4 or 5 points. And then the West Coast, Republicans call it the left coast. Whatever you want to call it, it's Democratic. It's solid Democratic. Don't be fooled by Arnold. Arnold couldn't even be nominated by the Democratic Party in a lot of states because he's so far to the left on social issues. He's an exception. He was elected because they wanted to get rid of Gray Davis. That's it. He's going to be reelected in November because the Democrats made a very stupid mistake in the primary and nominated the weaker candidate. He's in, but he's the exception. It doesn't change a thing in California. It's a heavily Democratic state, and it will continue to be automatically put in the Democratic camp, and 55 electoral votes to be automatically in the Democratic camp is a nice place to start for any election. Oregon and Washington, less Democratic, but still pretty reliable. But look at that sea of inland red that is Republican. Now, a lot of people call that flyover America. Chicago was always excluded. You had the coasts, and Chicago was the only legitimate place to stop in the middle of the country. And so you're excluded. But you know what? People in flyover America, I just did a 6-state tour in flyover America in the Midwest and the North Central South. This map is about geography, trees and rocks and acres, and that really is in American politics. Because despite the Electoral College, which can misfire, as it did in 2000, if you call that a misfire, electing a candidate who receives fewer popular votes, we really are about votes. Votes are the commodity of politics. It's the wheat and corn and soybeans of politics. So what would happen if you expanded or contracted every state to reflect its real weight in votes? You'd get the political map of America. Boom. Very good. You're catching the rhythm. That's good. You're moving up. All right. And look how close the volume is of the red versus blue here, because it was an extremely close election. 60,000 votes in Ohio. Had they switched, then Kerry would have had a 4-year term as president, even though Bush would have had a 3 million popular vote advantage nationally. The closest popular vote reelection for any president in American history who won reelection, the second closest electoral college reelection after Wilson's in 1916. So it was a very close election. And what state stands out? No, not Illinois, solid blue Illinois. It's Ohio. Just kind of hangs out there as though it doesn't quite belong, and it is a swing state, and it's swinging, as we will see November 7th. Does that mean it will swing in 08? Depends in part how new Governor Strickland is going to do, and that race is over. For those who haven't followed it, it's over. It's way over. It's Governor Ted Strickland, and it means 1% or 2 or 3 in Ohio. Doesn't mean as much in Illinois and for the governor, in Chicago for the mayor. Obviously, you're talking about 4 or 5 or 6%, but even in Ohio, it's 1, 2, 3% if you've got the governorship. They can mobilize the troops and get the troops to get people out to vote. So it really matters for the Democrats that Ohio is switching from red to blue. Let's look at one more version of that political map. Let's look at the regional map just to talk about these regions. The Northeast, the green region there, It's tiny geographically, but look how big it is on the political map. Solid Democratic, automatic votes in most elections for Democrats presidentially. That's the good news for Democrats. Bad news for Democrats is this region has shrunk by 1/3 since the 1960s. And it's going to lose another 3 or 4 electoral votes in 2010. And those electoral votes are going generally to the south, some to the west, but mainly to the south from the northeast. That blue region, the southern region, even though it's blue in this map, is actually solid Republican with a few squishy states, as we learned in 2000 and 1996 with Florida. Arkansas is not as Republican as the rest of the South, but it's mainly Republican. When I was growing up in Virginia in the 1950s, the South was 1/2 the size that it is on this map. It has doubled in that time, and it continues to grow overall substantially higher than the national average, mainly because of Texas and Florida. So that's good news for the Republicans, although it's becoming more diverse. You know, you look at Texas's population, you realize by 2050, it's going to be a shock if you don't have at least one of the senators being Hispanic. Probably at least one governor will have been Hispanic by that time. So maybe Santa Ana won after all, you know, when you really think about it. Okay, then the West Coast. California bulging out like Arnold's muscles. Look how impressive California is. But the interior West is also becoming more Democratic. Some of those states, Arizona, this is not Barry Goldwater's Arizona anymore, New Mexico, Nevada, especially Colorado, changing, moving more Democratic. And you're going to see Colorado turn blue in November. That race is over. The Democrats are taking over the governorship. They're strengthening their role in the state legislature. It's a great opening for Democrats in 2008. The key swing region, though, is yours. Not Illinois, which I think is pretty much guaranteed to any mainstream Democrat, but it's rather that you have so many states in the Midwest that are closely divided partisanly, including Michigan and Wisconsin and Iowa, which is 50-50. Missouri can be close. I've mentioned Ohio and so on. And that's where most of the money is spent in presidential elections because there are so many electoral votes that can be switched. Well, that's the presidential map. This is not a map that applies to midterm elections because midterm elections, despite what the media tell you, midterm elections are not national elections. They are state and local elections, and there are plenty of states and localities that don't have a race. There's nothing going on in loads of states, and every midterm election has a different map. Let me show you 2002, the last midterm election. This is a very strange view of the United States, isn't it? It's every state expanded or contracted to reflect the number of competitive races they had for Senate and governor and House. And see how distorted it is? The western states have shrunk. The election was really about Minnesota, Iowa, Maine, New Hampshire, Tennessee, South Carolina, Florida. That's what the election was about. But you never would have known it from the headlines. We read all kinds of universal things into midterm elections, and I'll be just as guilty as anybody else. You got to fill all that time on TV. You have to come up with something. You can't say it doesn't mean anything because people will turn to one of the movie channels. So it's very important to keep people's attention and exaggerate the truth. That's something we've learned from politicians. Now, I have a little different version of the map for this year, but I just finished it because we needed to see what the real level of competition was. Here is the 2006 midterm election map. That doesn't look much like the United States either, does it? It's going to be just as unrepresentative of the country. But look at this. It's Pennsylvania, it's Maryland, it's Ohio, it's Minnesota, Florida to a certain degree. Florida's grown in the past week or so. Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Jersey. Interestingly, the really competitive races are mainly, not entirely, but mainly in blue territory. What an advantage for Democrats. It's kind of the opposite of what happened in 2002. Good news for Democrats, it will help them to project a winning image out of the midterm elections. Let's look at the factors involved, and I call them the four North Stars of politics. I'm suspicious of polls, and polls come and go, and they're transient. You can turn them around overnight. The reason I like the four North Stars is because, like the North Stars in the firmament, They guide your view of any election, and they shine brightly, as they have since George Washington. Nothing's changed in these, in the categories at least. The individual issues have changed, but the categories are the same. The most important issue in any election is war and peace if there is a hot war. Interestingly, when there's peace, it doesn't count. People assume peace is the normal state, and they don't give administrations credit for it necessarily. I think, actually, unfortunately, as you study the history of man, the natural state of man is probably war rather than peace. But human nature is such that only when there's a hot war do they pay attention. We have 3 hot wars. Afghanistan's coming back. We all know about Iraq. And then the overall global war on terror. People haven't focused yet on Afghanistan. It's bad news. Not as bad as Iraq. Iraq is the big problem for Republicans. It's being seen increasingly. About 2/3 of Americans really see it as Vietnam without the jungle. That's the way they're viewing it, as a morass that we can't really get out of, and it's a major problem. They're not sure what to do, and they're not sure the Bush administration knows how to get out. And McNamara has come back, Robert S. McNamara, in the form of Donald Rumsfeld, who's more unpopular than President Bush, more unpopular than Dick Cheney, more unpopular than any other senior figure. That's why so many people inside the Bush administration, Andy Card, Laura Bush, and others, tried to get rid of him. See, they were reading the polls, and maybe that's good, maybe it's bad, but they wanted to get rid of him. He's still there, and it's a problem for the Republicans. Counterbalancing that, the global war on terror, which still favors Republicans, and that's why constantly you see Bush link Iraq to the global war on terror, trying to tap into that advantage that Republicans have. Then there's the economy, as I said, basically a good economy, but that's not how people look at it, even outside the Midwest. They don't look at it that way. Until recently, they were very upset about gas prices. I'll talk more about that in a moment. They were tremendously dissatisfied because of Hurricane Katrina and the federal government's weak response to that. They're unhappy because wages have not kept up with the increases in productivity. But as I say, underlying is a steady growth in the economy with relatively low inflation. Pretty good situation, better than the 90s when you had bubbles that would burst. The real estate bubble is not the equivalent of the tech bubble in terms of the economy and the damage it can do to the economy when it bursts. So the economy, glass half full, glass half empty, but on the whole, I'd say it's hurting the Republicans more than helping. It ought to be helping them more than it's hurting. That's where I would think that Karl Rove is going to try and work some magic before November 7th. Scandal. We all talk about scandal. We all tell each other how much we hate the scandal stories, but I've always found that everybody's nose is buried in the papers reading every detail. People love scandal. They don't admit it. They're horrified. No, they're not. They love it. They can't get enough of it. And that's why the Foley thing has taken over the newspapers and the television. Now, scandal is not even for both parties as it was in 2004. Partly this is because Republicans control everything in Washington, and they've had a ton of scandals. The CIA leakgate, which never took hold in the public mind. Tom DeLay, which kind of did and has cost Republicans 1 seat in Texas. Duke Cunningham, was forced to resign from the San Diego area. Congressman Cunningham has a special niche in history. He took more bribes than any congressman in history. $2.4 million, mainly in golden armoires, which is very difficult to do. I salute him for that. The Abramoff scandal, this is really interesting to me because I really thought this might take hold 6 months ago, and we've already had a number of congressmen ensnared in it and forced to resign or forced to bow out, and there are going to be other indictments, not only of congressmen, but of congressional staff coming. But it doesn't take hold. People don't care. They don't even know Abramoff's name. Why is that? Because people are cynical about congressmen. Most people simply assume that a fairly high percentage are on the take. I've had people say to me, come back to me when you have news. Let me know some news. Don't tell me that they're on the take. I already know that. I don't happen to agree with that. There are a lot of honest well, not honest, but no, there are a lot of uncorrupt congressmen. And, but that's not what people think. Now, the Democrats have had their share. Patrick Kennedy, Bill Jefferson is quite a story in Louisiana, but it is Louisiana. It is Louisiana. They save you, as does New Jersey, from being the corruption capital of America. So you need to keep that in mind. Alan Mollahan from West Virginia, corrupt. Cynthia McKinney, the voters caught on for a second time and got rid of her. So Democrats have had some scandals too, and it's reinforced the public view that both parties are corrupt, plague on both their houses, that kind of thing. I don't think scandal plays as big a role as people think, though the Foley scandal is the exception. That's the scandal that connects with all Americans. Everybody gets it. Just about everybody, 99% are outraged and disgusted by it. The details matter, and we don't know all the details, but the image is horrible for the Republican leadership. And by the way, it's cost them another seat. See, when a party gets ready to lose power, they start throwing seats away. So delays was thrown away by the way they handled it. There's no Republican nominee on the ballot. It's over in that seat in Texas, Texas 22. The Foley seat, what chance do you think there is of getting about 120,000 residents in that district to pull the lever or push the button on the computer screen next to Mark Foley's name? That's what they're facing, because you can't replace the name on the ballot at this point, even though there's a substitute nominee. Another one in Arizona, Randy Graff, Arizona 8, far right, anti-immigration. They threw the seat away by nominating this guy. The Republicans had a moderate conservative candidate they were trying to get nominated. Nope, the activists wouldn't have it. Boom. They've thrown the seat away. It's a Republican seat. So this is what happens when a party is literally trying to turn over power. Maybe because they're exhausted, their agenda's exhausted, their principles have been tried. I don't know. You come up with the combination of explanations, but it's mattering. It's making a difference. When was the last time that happened? The Democrats threw away a big number of seats with bad nominations in 1994. So a little hint maybe of what might be coming. And then the hot button social issues, we've always had those. Free silver, the progressive issues, we've always had something in this category. The Republicans have had some great issues for years that really play in the South and the conservative heartland: gay marriage, guns, death penalty, abortion. But Democrats are adding some issues that help them. Stem cells, 80% of Americans support the embryonic stem cell research. Republicans don't. The Terry Schiavo end of life issues. Immigration over the long run will favor Democrats. Hey, by 2050, if Republicans don't win a minimum of 45% of the Hispanic vote, they will never occupy the White House again. Think about that. That's why Bush and Rove want that immigration bill passed. Why won't the House Republicans pass it? Because their timeline is November, not 2050. Most of them will be dead or retired by then. They don't care about 2050. They're worried about this November. But it's a difference in timeline. Got to show you one graph on gas. And I think tonight on the CBS Evening News, they're going to show a version of this graph and talk about this issue. But it's really interesting. The top line here is Bush approval for his 5.5 years in office. That's the red line. The blue line is the reverse of gas prices. That is, the line goes up as prices go down. The line goes down as gas prices go up. What does it show? It shows an amazing correlation between the price of gas and presidential popularity. Is it a perfect correlation? No. This is not causation necessarily, but I do believe there is some relationship there. How do people view the economy? They view it in terms of what they pay at the pumps and what they pay in the market when they go get their groceries each week. But you're buying 100 things in the market. You're only buying one at the gas pump, and that makes a big difference. So I think that's very, very interesting. So if the Republicans hold on, remember the dramatic fall in gas prices. Now, where are we in terms of this election? You always look at presidential popularity for a midterm election. You have to look at it. And this is a graph of the 5 presidents who've served 2 terms since World War II. And that black line is the key line. The horizontal black line, 50%. When a president's above 50%, he can get just about anything passed. When he's below 50%, good luck. Even if the Congress is controlled by his party, he's not going to be able to get very much passed. Eisenhower was always popular. Really never had a problem even with Democratic Congresses. Worked well with Lyndon Johnson as majority leader. Ronald Reagan had some rough spots with the recession his first term and Iran-Contra second, but he was basically popular for the 2 terms. Got most of what he wanted through. Bill Clinton had a tough couple of years, then the economy improved, he got reelected and found the real key to popularity, having a sex scandal. 70%, he was more successful than anyone could have imagined in the second term with Republicans. There are 2 other presidents on this graph, and they're really, really close. They're hugging each other. And of course, I'm talking about Richard Nixon and George W. Bush. Their lines are intersecting. Now, there are some young people in the room. I want to remind you, the Nixon thing didn't end well. See, that's not the guy you want to be following. Okay, I don't know if they go back to the 70s and teach that part, but it's really not good. So what do we have? We have an early lame duck. Next graph. Early lame duck. As you pass Pennsylvania Avenue in the White House, you hear the quacking, which is very dangerous when you have a vice president with a gun who likes to hunt. See, that's a terrible thing. He's a lame duck. You know, look at history. We have presidents who are early lame ducks and late lame ducks. The late lame ducks are ideal because that way a president can be active right till the end, which is really what you want. You need the leadership. This president is an early lame duck. I can guarantee you, even if the Republicans hold on in November, it will be by the skin of their teeth. And these last 2 years, President Bush is going to be, at best, a foreign policy president, period. His agenda, his domestic agenda, isn't stalled, as I have it up here very kindly. It is dead, dead, dead. Social Security, dead. Tax reform, dead. Immigration reform, dead. It's gone. The country is deeply divided over Iraq and social issues. And so we have 2 elections to break the tie. First, I call the 6th-year itch election of 2006. All our political scientists in the room know about the 6th-year itch because historically it's been so powerful with only one exception. Teddy Roosevelt was popular his 2 terms, but in 1906 he had a 6th-year itch. And the Democrats picked up lots of seats. Woodrow Wilson, 6 months before the elections in 1918, won World War I. He had a 6th-year itch, lost both houses, lost the Versailles Treaty, lost his position in history as a great president because he lost the League of Nations. 1938, as popular as Franklin Roosevelt was, 6th-year itch because of the court packing scheme, boom. Republicans gained a lot of seats in the House, made it tougher on Roosevelt for 2 years. 1950, Korea. Harry Truman had his 6th-year itch. Republicans gained lots of seats in both houses. 1958, as popular as Eisenhower was, boom, 6th-year itch, massive Democratic majorities in both houses. 1966, 6th-year itch of the Kennedy-Johnson presidency, Vietnam, Republicans gained so many seats in the House, it ended the Great Society. 1974, the Nixon-Ford Watergate election, you know what happened, massive Democratic landslide. Most interesting examples, Reagan in 1986. He was at 63% popularity on Election Day. And in a big upset, the Democrats won the U.S. Senate, which led to the rejection of Robert Bork and lots of other problems for Reagan in the final 2 years. The only exception, Bill Clinton, 2 reasons. He was precocious. He had his 6th-year itch in the 2nd year. Only president ever to have a 6th-year itch in the 2nd year. And then you remember the backlash to impeachment. It did not work. Then a warning to Democrats, if they take over, don't be stupid. And there will be some Democrats who will be stupid and try to impeach Bush. So where are we going? We're going to the 6th-year itch for 2006. And let's get the next graph up there. And that's the cover of the book that Paul is going to participate in. And it's going to take some tough acting for Bush to ward off this 6th-year itch. Very briefly, I can't go over all the races. I'll take any questions that you have, but next graph, governors. Look, here's the long and short of it. Right now, Democrats have 22 governorships. They're going to pick up between 4 and 6. They're going to be at 26 to 28 after the election. They've got some big ones coming back to them. Massachusetts is returning. New York is returning. They're keeping Pennsylvania. They may well get Maryland. They can't get California. They will get Ohio. They will get Colorado. They will get Arkansas. We can talk about any of the others you want. So Democrats, move up in some key places that will help them in 2008. What about the Senate races? Right now, and this one I'm really watching because this is right on the edge, but I think Republicans will hold the Senate by a seat or two, but it's gotten really close. What will happen? Well, the Republicans might have gained Florida, but they nominated Katherine Harris. So that's over with. Missouri is 50-50. That's a Republican seat right now. Could go either way between Talon and McCaskill. Montana, I think, is gone for the Republicans. Conrad Burns is almost certain to lose to John Tester. Ohio, the big surprise, Mike DeWine is fairly popular, but there's this tremendous whirlpool in Ohio for the Republicans because Governor Taft is at 18%. That's up 10 points. He was at 8. He's at 18, but that's not good enough to win an election. And Tennessee's gotten close. An African-American may be elected there, Harold Ford. Virginia, I don't believe for a minute George Allen will lose Virginia. I know Virginia very well. The key to Virginia is that all of George Allen's mistakes and embarrassments have cost him the presidential nomination. He was a good shot to be the Republican presidential nominee in 2008. It's not going to happen. So it's his presidential race that's going downhill, not necessarily the Senate race. But other interesting races, Pennsylvania, I think Rick Santorum is gone. Republican Rick Santorum will be defeated. Lincoln Chafee could easily lose in Rhode Island. Rhode Island's the most Democratic state. It's 4 points more Democratic than Massachusetts. New Jersey is the only one that might go in the other direction, and I'm not convinced of that. I was just up there naturally with a meeting in Atlantic City. That's where they like to meet. Bob Menendez is corrupt. He has a big corruption problem. Since when did that bother voters in New Jersey? That's why I think he'll pull it out. But Governor Tom Kaine's son, Tom Kaine, is keeping this even, and we could have a surprise there. That could be the seat that saves the Senate for the Republicans, or, I don't know. I could see them keeping 51. We'll see. I wish we had time to discuss the House races. We don't. This is the sad part. Out of 435 seats in the House, there are truly only 40 highly competitive seats. And here we go. I mean, there they are. And it gets kind of depressing because there are so few. Now, you've got 2 on the list. I don't see Melissa Bean losing. It's close enough so that I put it on the list. Illinois 6 may or may not switch. We'll have to see. You'd be a better judge of that. It's one that we have as a toss-up. I don't believe for a minute that Hastert or Shimkus will be in danger because of the Foley scandal. There may be others, like Tom Reynolds in New York, who gets endangered because of the Foley scandal. But there you go. I mean, 40 out of 435. Congratulations to the politicians in the room for a great job of partisan redistricting all over the country, which ruins our job. This hurts us, those of us who analyze politics, and it's wrong. I just want to say that for that reason. Okay. One little economic note for those of you who invest. I want you to know if the Democrats take over Congress, I want you to buy housing, renewable fuels, liquid gas, health care, life insurance, and internet gambling stocks. Pay attention to what I'm saying. I want you to make money. And if they win, I want you to sell oil and energy company stocks, generally pharmaceutical companies. Get rid of them, baby. And Walmart. Get rid of your Walmart stock. That had nothing to do with politics, but I just want to see you be wealthy. And that was the reason I put that in. Finally, just very briefly on 2008, total free-for-all. Since 1928, we've always had a president or vice president running for election every 4 years. Not this time. No president, no incumbent president, no incumbent vice president. It's a free-for-all. And that means everybody in the world who thinks they might be president, meaning 99 out of 100 senators, are getting up in the morning, looking in the mirror, and seeing a president. Some of them have to be pretty hungover to see a president. The Republicans really are not starting out well, not just because Bush is unpopular. Their best candidates won't run. Best meaning have historically the best chance of winning. Condi Rice, who would take a larger share of women, larger share of African Americans, she won't run. She wants to go back to academe. We need to tell her about faculty meetings. That ought to cure that one. Jeb Bush knows the dynasty problem. Hillary Clinton hasn't gotten the message, but Jeb Bush has figured out that Americans are tired of electing Bushes and Clintons. Dick Cheney has shot his chances. It's not even funny anymore. The second tier, McCain has the best chance. You know, he's at 50-50. I only give him 50-50 odds. A lot of Republicans don't like Mavericks and never will. The last Maverick they nominated was Wendell Willkie in 1940, and he lost. Democrats love Mavericks. They nominate and lose with them all the time. But Republicans don't. Rudy Giuliani, right now he's leading the polls. He's 20 points over McCain in a lot of states. Get real. Look at his positions on abortion, totally pro-choice, even on partial birth abortion. Gay rights, I mean, come on. Lived with a gay couple in between the second and third marriages. How do you think conservative Republicans in Iowa are going to take Rudy Giuliani once they find out these are his stands? My guess is his opponents will let the people know sooner or later. He's not going to be the nominee. Bill Frist has had a disaster, as never should have been majority leader if you wanted to be president. The other possibilities are in the third tier. Sam Brownback, one-note samba. Mike Huckabee, I'm impressed with him. He lost 110 pounds, but I don't know that that's a qualification for being president. It's impressive. Jared lost more weight, from that sandwich shop. But anyway, Newt Gingrich, get real. You know, personal scandals galore, and people haven't explored them. George Pataki is a boring Giuliani. George Macaca Allen, I've already told you about him. Chuck Hagel, just a junior John McCain. The one I'm watching is Mitt Romney. You need to watch him. He's charismatic. He's a good speaker. He's governed Massachusetts, believe it or not, as a conservative. Not easy to do. His problems, Republicans trust no one from the Bay State. They assume you're liberal under the cover, even if you're not. And, of course, he's a Mormon. And Mormons have all these doctrinal disputes with fundamentalist Christians that I don't understand, but they're very serious. And they're going to have a hard time voting for a Mormon, though I'll bet he pulls a JFK and has that session with Southern Baptists or some denomination and essentially says, if you're tolerant, you'll vote for me. I don't speak for my church in matters of state, and they don't speak for me in anything but religion, right? Same thing as John F. Kennedy said back in 1960, and it worked. The Democrats, very easy to go through them. John Kerry, only guy didn't get the message. Not going to happen. Joe Biden, just think of the length of the State of the Union addresses. Not a chance. Russ Feingold, my old buddy from grad school, way too far to the left. Just not going to carry any red states. Really a problem. The Democrats need to think. Al Gore, the Hollywood community's for him. You know why? They think the other candidates are too boring. Now, Al Gore's the interesting one. Chris Dodd called me last week. He was in South Carolina. Said, Fritz Hollings is here. Says I'm the only Yankees ever known with a Southern sense of humor. Chris, it's in your mind. Okay? This is not going to happen. John Edwards, watch. He's back at it. And see, I put him in the liberal and conservative category. Depends on where he is. And he's very good at it. Very good at it. Keep in mind, he's leading in Iowa. He's ahead in the Nevada caucuses, one of the first 4 states. He could beat Hillary. We'll see. Problems? He lost his home state. He lost his home county in 2004. He lost his home precinct. See, the home folks are trying to tell us something. Be careful. Be careful. Barack Obama, I wouldn't dream of telling you about Barack Obama. I don't believe he's running in 08. I've heard about the draft movements. I just don't believe it. I think he's smart enough to get some seasoning run later. He'll be on a ticket. It's inevitable, sooner or later, but not in 08. Tom Vilsack, nice guy. Forget about it. Governor of Iowa. Wesley Clark, no Dwight Eisenhower. Bill Richardson, I love. He can eat you under the table. He can drink you under the table. He's a good Chicago Paul. But VP maybe. Got a great resume. VP maybe. I don't think Democrats are going to go for president. You got 2 moderates left. Evan Bayh, red state of Indiana. 2 landslides as governor. 2 landslides as senator. Perfect family. Moderate record. Mark Warner, 80% popularity in red Virginia. Very successful governorship. Business executive, worth a couple $100 million. Really out there working. Eric is for him. And he's not here in Illinois. I think he's heading up the draft Warner thing as one of the key people for it. And Mark Warner is a good friend of mine as well. Let me tell you something. I want you to add electoral votes, just very briefly, okay? Indiana, 11 red electoral votes switched blue by Evan Bayh. Ohio, right next door, 3 overlapping media markets, 20 red electoral votes switched blue. Mark Warner, 13 red electoral votes in Virginia, plus 5 in West Virginia, which has been voting Republican. You add those up, 49 red electoral votes switched blue, election over. It's over. There aren't that many votes available to the Republicans. This Bayh Warner or Warner Bayh ticket makes so much sense the Democrats will never nominate it. So those of you who are Republicans, relax. You don't have a thing to worry about. Okay? And then we come to Hillary. Look, Hillary, you went to that too fast. I didn't give the buildup. What I was going to say, there went your pay. There went one big mistake wipes out all the good ones. Okay, look, bright woman, experience. My God, she's running for the 3rd term. I mean, this is her 3rd term as president potentially. So she's got plenty of pluses, but the cold persona, all the leftover scandals that she was involved in, which will be regurgitated constantly. But her biggest piece of baggage, you've just seen it, it's him. And you say, no, that can't be true. He's in the 70s. Yeah, he's in that post-presidential glow. People love the post-presidential glow. We hate our presidents and love our former presidents until they start running again. All right? And let me tell you something. The press is chomping at the bit, including liberal press like the New York Times. They're dying to reveal what they know. Do you think he's been good since 2000? Do you think he's been good? You know the answer to that. All right? Most Americans haven't focused on this yet. He'll be moving back into the White House with less to do. Think about it. Think about it. So, back in 1992, the Clintons had a great slogan, and it fit the times perfectly, socially, politically, culturally. It was perfect. Remember, 2 for the price of 1, 2 for the price of 1. Well, you see, there's a lot of age on that now, and it doesn't look nearly as attractive for 2008. There it is. 2 for the price of 1. That was bad. I only put that in. Eric, the Warner guy, insisted that I put that slide in. I didn't want to do it. Now, he's an elected councilman in Oak Park, right? If you feel strongly about that slide, I want you to go vote against him in the next election. That's the right thing to do. So how do Republicans keep the White House? Bush has to turn the polls around somehow and become popular again. Very tough. The party has to pick a mainstream conservative. I don't know. They can goof. How do the Democrats win the White House? They're going to win it in the next several elections because we have a 2-party system. Or if they want to win early in 2008, they have to choose a moderate nominee, probably from a red state. They need to tone down their liberalism on the hot button issues. They need to change their party image from the blue elite to down home, not red. They'll never be red, but Democrats can be purple. That is the key to their color scheme to recapture the White House. I call my presentation the crystal ball, but I always say he who lives by the crystal ball ends up eating ground glass. And no doubt I'm going to eat some based on the projections I made today, but I hope you won't remember. That's the other good thing about 33 days until the election. There's no way you'll remember what I've said. Will you, Paul? Promise me you won't remember. Do we have any time for questions? Or okay, good. Thank you. And short answers for a change.
Based on what you said about Hillary and about Rice, when, if at all, do you foresee a potential of a woman president of the United States or a woman running?
My Center for Politics at UVA just had a year-long symposium on women in politics, co-sponsored by the Harvard Kennedy School and Berkeley. And our entire goal was to answer that question. When are we going to do this? And our conclusion was Probably, and this is a vague year, but it's within 20 years, and that sounds like a long time, but here's why. It has taken women a long time to build up the 70 seats in the House and the 13 or so in the Senate. It's taken them a long time to reach almost a quarter of state legislative positions, and they've got a bunch of governors, 9 governors now. This is the key to women's success in politics, is winning the lower offices and getting promoted through the ranks. That's the way we do it. Sooner or later, there will be a woman on the ticket. Again, we just had Jerry Ferraro come down. Our center brought her down to speak, and had 800 people show up, packed to the rafters, fascinated to see this historic first woman on a major national party ticket. But I'm amazed it hasn't happened yet. I'm amazed neither party has put a woman on since 1984. Jerry Ferraro didn't cost Mondale the White House. You couldn't have picked a Democrat who would have added more than a state or two to Mondale. So I think we've had the Ferraro effect wrongly for too long. And I'm an optimist. I think that both parties are going to be selecting women for the national tickets within the next couple of elections.
One follow-up. Do you think that woman candidate for president would come from the governorship or the U.S. Senate?
Well, it ought to come, she ought to come from the governorship. Look, Kathleen Sebelius in Kansas is just getting reelected in a landslide. Democratic governor of Kansas. Really tough to do for a Democrat to get elected governor and get reelected. She's the daughter of former Ohio Governor Jack Gilligan. Nobody ever mentions her. She ought to be mentioned. I think in her second term, she will be. Frankly, Governor Granholm of Michigan, even though she's having trouble in her reelection, I think she'll win it in the end. It's the economic problems. But were she not a Canadian citizen, there would have been a boomlet for her for 2008. So they're out there, and I think in the next few years they are going to get a lot more attention.
Hi, Jim Mariner. I'm a political writer.
Yes,
Professor,
sir.
you and I recently had an email exchange on your contention that Illinois, New Jersey, and Louisiana are the most corrupt states.
Yeah, I did say that. Yeah, but I said Louisiana and New Jersey were worse.
Well, I recently interviewed Jim Thompson, former governor.
Yes.
I said, Sabato says Illinois, Jersey, and Louisiana are the most corrupt states. What do you think about that? And he said, Illinois can't hold a candle to those states. Illinois is not that corrupt. So could you persuade Jim Thompson that we're number one?
First of all,
No,
he's
more-
not called Big Jim for nothing. So
More
and I'm a
seriously,
little
sir.
shrimp. I wouldn't try to persuade him of anything. In fact, if I were in the same room with him, I would come out agreeing with him, and it would be his position.
Okay,
but no,
seriously.
I can't convince anybody of anything, but
Serious
I can try
question.
and persuade. I mean, look, you gave me some great figures. I don't want to repeat them because they're depressing. I know it was in the couple hundred of aldermen and other key people from Chicago have been indicted and jailed, I believe, indicted and convicted within what time period? Since the 70s. You've had a couple of governors reach the penitentiary. This is not a good record, but, I think things are improving. I'm crossing my fingers. I think things are improving, crossing my toes. I don't know. It's up to you. It's always up to the voters. The voters have to set the standards. And if you won't tolerate corruption, corruption won't be tolerated. If you tolerate it, it will be.
This is the last question. No one get in line anymore. You are it. We'll make it a good
Okay,
one.
thank you. I'm Mo Headington from Burridge, Illinois, and I'm an environmental activist.
Yes.
2 parts. One is I'd like to know what, if any, role you think environmental issues will play in this election. And secondly, my feeling has been, because I'm a news junkie and I keep TVs on and all the different channels and I tape an awful lot of them, and I'm finding that I see clips on The Daily Show that I don't find on other news channels, and I'm wondering if I have concerns about what the media shows us and what it does not, because quite frankly, I feel I get my straightest news from Jon Stewart lately.
Well, I watch Stewart and Colbert.
Colbert, absolutely.
As well, because I know he's a Chicago guy, and I enjoy them enormously. I like to go to bed laughing, and whether I agree or disagree with what they're saying, I'm laughing. Look, on your first question, very easily answered. I know it's not going to be the answer you want, but essentially almost nothing. There'll be some isolated races where environmentalism will matter. Why? Environmentalism is crowded out this year. There are so many big issues, you know, Iraq and the economy and all the other things I was talking about. It's just not on the list. Another year it may be. But here's a problem for those of you in the environmentalist movement. Everybody claims to be an environmentalist. Elections are about differences, well-defined differences. And when all the candidates say, I'm an environmentalist, no, I'm more environmentalist than you are, whatever the record is, most people say, well, they're all for the environment, so we have to find some other difference among them. Education suffers the same way. Everybody loves education, talks about education, but it's rarely a deciding issue in at least a federal election, simply because the plans are not well defined enough to be different. Now, on Colbert and Stewart, look, they use real clips. I mean, I've seen many of the clips, so I can assure you that they're not making them up. That part of the show is real. How they splice them together, of course, is not always fair. But it does worry me a bit that my students, and probably your students or your children, get a lot of their news from, Leno and Letterman's monologues and Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert, because, you see, that really isn't the news. It's a parody of the news, and everything's exaggerated. I call it the docudramatization of American politics. Everything's a docudrama. People get their news from docudramas, whether it's Jon Stewart or the 9/11 show on ABC or that Reagan documentary that aired. Gee, I wish people would just watch the History Channel. It would be a lot healthier for everybody. Thank you all very much. I'll do it.